Chapter 7, Section 8. This is in our Gaddis book, and it's on designing classes yet, and this one's going to talk about private member functions. And then we'll do an example after we look at the PowerPoint slides here. But a private member function can only be called by another member function of the same class, and it's used for internal processing and not for outside of the class. And that's the only slide on it, so I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio and we're going to look at an example of it. We are going to be using the circle class that we worked with before, and what I'm going to do is introduce a diameter variable. And remember, when I do that, it potentially introduces stale data if I do that. So what I'm going to need to do is to create an update diameter method. And I was going to do update circumference, but I switched to diameter. So I had written some code, and I thought instead of changing it all, and then I'm going to show you how you could do that quickly instead of me just changing it behind the scenes. You have this find feature, and what I just did there was a Control F, and I did a find, and if I open up this little toggle switch here, I can replace every word circumference with diameter. And then I can choose to do a replace next. So if I do that, we can see it's going to switch, and it might help if I spelled diameter correctly. So let's try that again. Diameter. And then we can replace next. Or we could choose, if I scroll down and I look to see where all of the instances show up, I can also just choose to replace all. You want to be careful of replacing all, because sometimes it's going to replace things that you did not expect. And so if I go back here and correctly spell update diameter, then we should be good. So here's the deal. We are using a private method, update diameter. And if you remember looking at the slide, they can only be used within the class. I can't use that outside of the class. I will show you how it will fail in just a few moments. But what we want to do is this. Every time I change the radius, the diameter should change. That would then prevent what we would call stale data. So in my default constructor, right here for circle, I'm going to update diameter. In my parameterized constructor, I'll put in a few comments here, that the first one is a default constructor because it has no parameters in it. So this is my default constructor. The second is a parameterized constructor because it has a value coming in. That's a parameter. And I update that diameter there. Don't forget that we also have destructors. That's from one of the previous videos. I took out the comments though. This is how your destructor will normally look, is something like this. And then we have, if I set the radius, if I reset the radius, I also need to call update diameter there as well. Okay, and so now the only other thing I noticed was I did not camel case this, which is something that actually would bother me, and it should be camel cased. So I'm going to do a find and replace again. This time I'm going to find update diameter lowercase, and I'm going to replace it with update diameter uppercase. And I'm just going to scroll through and see where those values are selected. It looks like it's going to be able to hit replace all, and it replaced 4 occurrences. So now when I go to run my program down here, I can go ahead, and I didn't show you, but I did have a get diameter method somewhere. So I have a get diameter method, and I'm going to make that. So that was one of my edits that accidentally got done when I did a search and replace, was it changed that lowercase to uppercase, or vice versa. So I have to be careful of that. But that's just going to return the diameter then. And so I'm going to go ahead and run this code and see if we can get this to execute. And it's going to output not only the radius but also the diameter. The error message I'm getting here is probably a typo. And so there is no member get diameter. I went ahead and fixed the typo, and then I copied and pasted the different circles so we could see what our results were going to be. I ran the program to test, and our diameter does turn out to be twice as much as each of the radii that was inputted here. So radius of 2, diameter of 4. And so that illustrates an example of a private method within a class. It can only be used within the class for access, and it is used as a worker method for that class only. It is not accessible outside that class. To demonstrate that, I could try to call the update diameter, but if you look, it's not available on my list here. And so if I try to type it out and call it, it's also going to tell me that that function is inaccessible, which is telling me that it's not at a level or access level that I can use. And so I cannot update the diameter. All of that will be done behind the scenes. It's going to be a code that I can only access and change the diameter if I change the radius.